Hey, what's up? It's Dan from National Product. I'm in Guatemala with Enoch Magazine.
What did you think this trip would be like for you?
I honestly wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. I knew that we'd be doing some ministry to the indigenous people of Guatemala, and I was kind of thinking it would be kind of like National Geographic, like wieners and boobs hanging out everywhere, but it turned out to be that they were a lot more westernized than I had anticipated. However, the mentality of how they cultivate their land and the culture of how they live is still pretty much intact with their indigenous ancient ways, and that was really cool. But I was basically looking forward to coming out and being as close to them as possible, and if that meant not wearing shoes and eating whatever they ate and running along with whatever their rituals were, then I was going to do that. So I completely opened myself up to any possibilities that Guatemala had to offer me.
Part of the trip for you was about the Dia de la Cruz and the whole holiday that surrounds that. Just tell about your experience with Dia de la Cruz.
Dia de la Cruz is, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, it's the Day of the Cross, and it was a 2-day festival that took place in Nueva Santa Rosa. And the first day that we actually came in, we were prepping for the carrying of the cross, and I'd never carried a cross before in a physical way. So Nate and I went with Cesar, and we went into the town, and we gathered probably around 150 to 200 kids, and we both took turns carrying this like 80 to 100 pound cross through these raggedy streets. And we just had these kids following us all the way back to the house that we're staying in, Cesar's house, and then we gave a little bit of love to them and fed them and played with them and kind of spoke to them about what the cross is about. And I sang "Row, Row, Row Your Boat," which was the worst I've ever sang in my life, and I probably looked the stupidest I ever looked in my life. So it was a very humbling experience. And then when we actually did the carrying of the cross, the first day we were just riding in the back of a truck all the way to Nueva Santa Rosa. It was like a 4-mile truck ride, throwing out candy and waving to the kids and the people from that town. But the second day was actual carrying of the cross through the town, and the selfish part of me was like, oh, I don't want to have to carry this 80-pound cross all the way like 3 to 4 miles up and down hills in the hot sun all the way into this town. And Nate carried the cross for like the very first portion of it, and then I took over, and when I took over I kind of didn't want to give up the cross. Like, I wanted to feel the pain of actually carrying this heavy cross and feel the weight of it. And I had mentioned that actually carrying the cross puts a whole new meaning to the weight of the cross, not just physically but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, because there's a really big weight and responsibility that comes with being a Christian and carrying that cross. And I know that in my life I haven't led the most strongest walk in my personal life, but I definitely want to be the best representation I can be for other people, whether they're Christian or non-Christian. I want to live my life in the most positive, loving way, so that nobody can ever look at me and be like, that guy's not an awesome dude, or that guy's not an awesome representation of Christ. Even if in my own personal life I'm sometimes not the best reflection. And that's something that I think every Christian is continuously working on. So I actually had this cross just digging into my shoulders, and it was really painful. And then I started to pray and feel very blessed and thankful that I had the opportunity to be in a foreign country like Guatemala and carry this cross, and the responsibility that was given to me. And I looked at the faces of some of the older people, and I could just tell how proud they were to see a young person carrying a cross like that. And I looked at a lot of the younger people, and they were looking up to their parents and their older brothers or sisters and asking, why is that guy carrying that cross? Like, it looks painful, it looks heavy, and I could tell on their faces, and I could see some people were jaded and looking at me like, that guy's an idiot for carrying that cross, like, what is he thinking? And then I saw some people that were, my age in their early to mid-20s, and just kind of going like, wow, I wonder, why he's carrying that cross. And you could just tell from the various facial expressions, even though we didn't speak the same language, you knew what they were thinking or what they were saying to themselves or others. And so as the weight of the cross became more painful and harder to deal with, I just kind of started to pray more, and I just bolted with this extreme amount of strength. And during the end of the walk, I was carrying this 80-pound cross with one hand, my left hand, my weakest arm, above my head, and I just felt like I was the strongest person in the world, and I had this heavy cross in my left hand way above my head, and I made it a mission to make sure that I brought that heavy cross all the way to the center of town, where they have a cross that welcomes you to their town, this huge, massive cross. Then when I got to that cross, I felt like I still had strength to continue carrying it, and kept carrying it through the sea of people. And it was just a really powerful moment, I think, to carry it through a few thousand people watching me carry this cross above my head. And at one point, Caesar had to tell me, you need to put the cross down and walk a little slower and make people think. And I was like, yeah, that's true, because that's the point of why I'm here. I'm not here to just show off that I can lift an 80-pound cross with my left hand, but I got to show that the power of God is also, with me as I'm dragging this cross, carrying it and representing it. So it was really awesome. And I think one of the most awesome moments was the day before. There was this guy who had passed out from drinking too much, and he had fell on his face. And people didn't even pick this guy up, like they just let him there, and he was bleeding from his head, and he was just on the ground completely passed out, and people were making fun of him because he was a passed out drunk. I felt really bad for him. I wanted to reach out to him and pick him up and like help him out, whether he was drunk or not. And ironically, as we were coming through this sea of people, they were all spread to watch us walk through the crowd. In the very middle of the crowd, at the very end, was that same drunk guy, and he had dirt all over the side of his face because he obviously fell, the very next day. He had obviously fell that day too, and his face was just all mashed up on the side, and he was just in the middle of the parade, all dazed and confused. And I just stopped with the cross, and I put my arm around him and just loved on him right before I walked past him, in a display of affection, to just be like, I love them all, regardless of who you are or what your situation is. And so, to me, that's what being Christ-like is about.
I'm gonna catch me a chicken. I'm gonna catch me one. I almost had him. Here I go. This is it.
Danny Casler versus the chicken.
I got one. I ain't gonna hurt you. Not gonna hurt you, dude. Caught me a chicken.